A teraz, szanowni państwo, perspektywa Banku Światowego. Higher Education for the 21st Century. Global Challenges, Opportunities for Poland. Globalne wyzwania, a zarazem szanse, okazje dla Polski. Przedstawi je pani dr Nina Arnhold, Senior Education Specialist właśnie w Banku Światowym. The floor is yours. It's a real honor for us.
Dzień dobry. Good afternoon. Distinguished audience, it's an honor. Now I can see you. Congratulations on an outstanding process, on an outstanding event, and what seems to be a bold reform proposal. The World Bank had the pleasure to be engaged in the sector in Poland for many years. We observed the sector and we learned a lot from Poland, which we also brought to other countries. And now I'm looking forward to reading the proposed legislation, and we will also share some observations in the context of the general process. Now, having said this is not what I'm going to talk about today. I haven't read the draft legislation yet. I followed the discussions yesterday. But today, my task is going to be a different one. And together with you, step back a little bit and say, well, we discussed financing, quality assurance, governance issue, organization of the doctorate. But as we move into the 21st century, there are going to be a couple of developments which might change the way we think about higher education and the nature of the contribution which higher education makes. Well, as we all know, this is all about something, as somebody said quite rightly this morning. We have tools and we have things which we try to achieve. So universities achieve a lot. They are about social cohesion, they make a cultural contribution. But if we consider things through the lens of modern economies, then of course two particular points are of particular importance. And one is innovation, and the other one is the support and the preparation of well-trained graduates. Now, if you jump into a taxi in any European capital and you kick off a discussion on young people going into higher education, what you will hear most of the time is, oh, all these young people going into higher education, they don't know what they are doing. And this is actually how I met Professor Gorniak, not in a taxi, but through his speech, is our youth overeducated? This is a question which, well, concerns all of us, and yesterday there was a discussion on this. Do we have too many universities in Poland? And you all know the overall trends. Number of students continue to rise globally, and you've also seen this development in Poland, in particular in the 1990s and in the years 2000. So this is the trend. Now, is this a worthwhile investment? I think we all know the answer to this question. Yes, it is. Yes, the unemployment rates are lower. People tend to be employed also later in life. If you look at people in their 50s, in their 60s, also in Poland. And if you consider returns on investment for an individual, but also for society, they are still remarkable. They have been reduced a little bit in Poland, but they are still, the tendency is still clear. You also know the situation when it comes to demographic developments, and Poland is not too different from many, many other European countries. So what we see is that people tend to live longer. This is fantastic. So we have more older people, which reflects health outcomes and these kind of things, but we have less and less young people, which of course change the way we will need to think about productivity and contributions to the economy and to society in future. Now we can say, but globally we still see increases in population numbers, and that's indeed the case for some time. So as we go into the 21st century, what we are going to see is that there's going to be a plateau, and then overall population numbers are going to shrink. So something we discussed today on a kind of voluntary basis, that we consider labor mobility, that we consider internationalization, that we consider returnees program. This all seems to be nice, but this topic will get a very different urgency as we move deeper into the 21st century. Skills are still a major constraint for the development of businesses, especially advanced skills, as they are delivered through higher education, and it's particularly a problem for middle-income countries like Poland. However, the nature of skills which is in demand is changing. We've seen this before. So we came from technical skills and we moved more into something which we could call generic skills. Yes? So in the past, employers would say, I need an engineer with these and that detailed skills, and this is still the case. But the answers we get in related surveys, it is much more on questions of complex thinking, creativity, etc. And also in the short term, we see movements there. So we see more requests for what we could call fuzzy skills, which are highlighted here. I highlighted creativity, cognitive flexibility, and related things. And then, of course, the question is, why is this so? And Professor Dietl yesterday already gave us a glimpse by talking a little bit about artificial intelligence, and I will talk about this more. Okay, so the first question is, you know, there's artificial intelligence, and increasingly machines can do things which we used to do, and they do them better than we used to do them. And to some extent, that's extremely pleasant. So if you look at my slides, the first point is folding laundry. Machines are now better than we are in terms of folding laundry. That's fantastic, and it will save many marriages. However, as we move down the list, we see a different type of task. Writing a bestseller, yes, conducting mathematical research, and then conducting research actually on artificial intelligence. So machines expand the scope of what they can do. And again, it has implications for us, what we learn and what we plan to teach. Okay. Now, we come from a background, or maybe from a type of thinking where we feel artificial intelligence is very much about low skills, the whole laundry folding business. I want to tell you a little story which has to do with a game, with a match. And some of you might remember the year 1997 when a computer called Deep Blue played chess against Garry Kasparov. And for those interested in the game, this was an interesting moment, so what will come out of it? And there were two matches at the time, and Mr. Kasparov won the first match, and the machine won the second match. People thought, well, that's quite impressive, but if we consider chess, it's a quite complex game, but it is still a very rules-oriented game. We are not surprised that you can program a machine to perform in this kind of match. Now, this pushed the boundary of the whole discussion to some extent, because there is another board game which some of you might know. It's called Go. It's an Asian board game. It seemed to be simpler. You have only two types of token, a white token and a black token, and the rules are pretty straightforward. But in order to win this game, you need a different type of skills and a different type of qualities, and many of these qualities were considered as deeply human. People who research this game say that the type of rules you apply are more qualitative, and you need a tremendous amount of creative thinking in order to win this game. Now, a new machine was built. It is called AlphaGo, and it was fed like tens of millions of Go matches, and it learns this. And then the machine started to develop neuronal networks, and it started to learn itself, and it started to do new things. And when the match was on against the human, the name of the human is Lee Sedol. He is a worldwide master in this game. When the match was on, the machine played, and those who had programmed this machine found it difficult to explain what was going on. Some of the stuff which happened looked outright crazy. And they said, we have no idea why the machine is doing this. And then over the course of a long game, it became clear that this was just brilliant. And none of us, including those people who had programmed the machine, would have come up with these ideas. So what I'm saying here is, we are entering a different area. As humans, we are not competing anymore against machines who are folding laundry. And it fits with this that last week, the Chancellor of the British government has announced that a certain range of tasks of the British government in future will be performed by artificial intelligence. I know this sounds very weird, but this was the announcement. And I put here a picture of Boris Johnson with a robot, and I hope that also in future we will have a clear understanding of who does what. Now I would like to move to the next slide. Yes. So are we talking about something which will happen in 50, 70, 80 years? That's not the case. Yes. So on this slide, you see a couple of developments and 800 tech specialists and executives were interviewed, how likely they consider these things to occur in 2025, which is actually nearly now. Yes, that's in 7.5 years. It will go like this. Yes, so we will have organs which come out of 3D printers, we will have driverless cars, that's clear, etc. And this, of course, means that many jobs are going to disappear. I think we are all aware of this. These are largely low-skilled jobs, and these are largely repetitive jobs. So you might have jobs for which you need certain skills, but which are still repetitive, like in accounting, etc. That's going to happen, but at the same time, and that's the good news, new jobs are going to be created. But if we look at these jobs, those which disappear are low-skilled, repetitive, and those which are created are mainly jobs for knowledge workers. So if you read the literature, for example, OECD says that out of the newly created jobs, 80% are going to be for knowledge workers. Now, knowledge workers means these are people with higher education. And this gives us a little bit of a glimpse of the importance higher education is going to play as we move forward. And we can ask ourselves to what extent we already prepare young people for this reality which is already there at our footsteps. Okay. The nature of skills is going to change, and we already see this. I will not go too much into this. Of course, at the University of Krakow, excellent research has been done on this in the context of the human capital inventory, and this continues to change, and we see things like sense-making, and of course, all of us want to see more of this. Okay, so what does it mean for higher education? I mean, many of you will remember the statement by Peter Drucker from 1997, where he basically said the university is finished, it's over, we can all go home, we can close the campuses, they are not needed anymore. And this was, of course, a statement which was also made vis-à-vis new modes of delivery. So it was about MOOCs and certain technological developments, and the sense at the time was we don't need universities anymore. Now we know that this is not the case. It's 20 years later, universities are still going strong, that's fantastic, and we can say that there is a persistent interest in collaborative learning and collaborative research, so the universities are there to stay. However, going back onto what I said about the new requirements, universities will need to bring themselves a different type of skills. And one point where the researchers agree who are looking into this is that it is primarily a question of the ability to adapt to these different circumstances. And you see a nice flower on this slide and a kind of wish list for the university of the future. And some of these topics have already been discussed in the last days. And I highlighted something on the top of the flower because I think this is a crucial point, and it is also going to be the crucial point for the reform of universities in Poland. And you see two words in red there. One is international, and the other one is locally connected. Now, talking about international, when I talk to colleagues in Poland, I mean, we all have things we wish for our countries in terms of higher education. And maybe some people would like to see a kind of MIT in Poland. This would be fantastic. But maybe we cannot do it because the funding is not there. Now, I have two observations on this. The first one is, if I listen, or I've listened to Professor Winkler yesterday, to the report of the Horizon 2020 group, I get the sense that maybe there is money, yes? There is enough money to support a completely distinct structure focusing on basic education, yes? So what I'm talking about is that there are the academies of science with a separate structure of institutes which are not integrated into the university landscape. So that's my remark on the funding question. But there's also a different remark. If we research what people like to call world-class universities, yes, money is one factor, but it's not the only one. There seem to be a critical size, so there is a too small and a too big, and it is a matter of internationalization. So if we look at internationally renowned, outstanding universities, there is a certain percentage of international staff and international students. This is also to some extent a question of money, but not only, it's also a question of will, and it is a question of ideas. Yes. So the money issue alone might not do the trick and produce, how can we call it, PIT overnight. It takes a couple of other things. So that's on the international side. Locally connected, the minister yesterday thanked the Polish elites for everything they've done for the sector and for the country after 1989, and of course we all agree with him. But there's also somewhere the unknown student in a small higher education institution in a remote region. Those of us who have foreigners have never heard the name of this institution. Maybe the family put money together to put this young man into higher education. Maybe he worked during the day and studied in the evening. He got a bachelor. He joined the Polish service industry, and he made a contribution to the economy of this country. And I think the people who did this, we can also thank them for the success of the society and of the Polish economy in the past 25 years. So I will finish at this point ahead of time. When we move ahead with reforms in higher education and we want to take into account these issues which will become more and more pressing, and I talked about two of them, one being the whole question of demographic development, not only in one country but in the region and increasingly worldwide. The second one being artificial intelligence and a future generation which will work vis-à-vis artificial intelligence, either in cooperation or competition or both. When we consider this, there will be two key decisions to make on the policy level. And one of them is the question of productivity, the contribution we will make as a higher education sector to the productivity of the countries of the future, in the future. And the second point is going to be a question of equity. This is a term, I think, which hasn't come up at the event yet. But when we say that 80% in the future are going to be knowledge workers, these are not going to be the precious few. So we will need to think about young people who might not be the focus of attention all the time, but whom we need, and who also have a right to be taken into account. And once these 2 points are considered, then we move to the instruments, financing, QA, governance, organization of teaching and learning, and research. I think it's great that Poland is setting up its internationalization agency. I'm looking forward to the next steps. And yes, best wishes from our side. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this inspiring speech showing us the shape of future. Once again, thank you. A przed nami, szanowni państwo,